Tonight at 10, the UK is at the worst point of the pandemic so far, and lockdown rules might have to be tightened further still. The warning comes as details are published of a mass vaccination programme with 7 major centres open across England.
The next few weeks are going to be the worst weeks of this pandemic in terms of numbers into the NHS.
We report from another hospital under sustained and significant pressure amid warnings that next week could be even worse.
So I don't know how much more we can do before it gets to there's no more room, there's no more beds, there's no more nurses, there's no more space, there's no more anything. So yeah, I'm quite apprehensive.
More than 2.3 million people have now been vaccinated across the UK, but the government's under pressure to boost that rate. Also tonight, a failed asylum seeker who murdered 3 men in a park in Reading last year is sent to prison for the rest of his life. After last week's invasion of the US Capitol, Donald Trump is set to be the first president to be impeached a second time. And
people can interrupt you without not even knowing, because they don't know that you're about to speak.
And we talk about stammering, and we explore the link with the next 4 years at the White House.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, without their manager and 13 players isolating because of coronavirus, a severely depleted Celtic take on Hibs in the Scottish Premiership.
Good evening. The United Kingdom is at the worst point of the pandemic so far, with hospitals under sustained and significant pressure and the possibility that lockdown rules might have to be tightened further still. The Health Secretary for England, Matt Hancock, issued that warning as he set out the details of a mass vaccination programme with 7 major centres open across England and more of them to come. So far, some 2.3 million people across the UK have been given a first dose of coronavirus vaccine. That's an average of just over 140,000 a day over the past week. More than 300,000 people will need to be vaccinated daily if the government is to reach its target and vaccinate the high priority groups by mid-February. Now, the vast majority of deaths with COVID are seen in the most vulnerable groups, and experts say the UK is entering the most dangerous time of the pandemic in the weeks before the vaccines can have a significant impact. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh has the latest.
Waiting patiently in line, healthcare workers in Newcastle, the over 80s in Bristol, Manchester, London and Birmingham, among 7 mass COVID vaccination centres which open today in England.
I've lost a lot of relatives, so I needed to show people that there's nothing wrong with the vaccine. It has been tested and we need to get the vaccine.
You have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and to not be able to see them is really hard.
I feel very relieved. I feel that this is the way back. I really think that I can't understand anybody, not wanting to have it.
Are you getting the AstraZeneca or the Pfizer?
AstraZeneca. The Prime Minister in Bristol said the UK had immunised more people than any country in Europe, but the sense of urgency is palpable, with hospitals close to being overwhelmed by COVID patients.
It's a race against time, because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under, the demand in intensive care units, the pressure on ventilated beds, even the shortage of oxygen in some places.
By the end of the month, the promise is everyone in England will be within 10 miles of a vaccination centre. For now, some are travelling much longer distances and braving the cold. Such is the demand to get protected.
The vaccine programme is our way out of this pandemic, but it won't have an effect, unfortunately, for a month or two. So in the meantime, the NHS is under really intense pressure. Our hospitals are filling up with people with COVID, and we have to reverse that.
These mass immunisation centres will be open from 8 till 8, 7 days a week, part of the biggest vaccination drive ever in the NHS. The aim is to offer a first dose of COVID vaccine to up to 15 million people by mid-February. That's all over 70s, frontline health and social care workers, plus people who are currently shielding. A steady supply of COVID vaccines is vital. This GP surgery in Midlothian is one of over 1,000 in Scotland now offering immunisation. In Wales, where there's been some criticism of the speed of rollout, ministers say all over 50s will be offered a COVID vaccine by the spring. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Let's stay with the pandemic and our coverage of it. Let's go through the latest figures tonight. They show that there were 46,169 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means that on average the number of new cases reported per day in the past week is 57,851. 529 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. And this number is usually reported lower after the weekend. On average in the past week, 926 deaths were announced every day. The total number of deaths so far across the UK is 81,960. Now, there are 13,000 more COVID patients in hospital in England today than there were on Christmas Day, bringing the current total to just over 32,000. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has been to Croydon University Hospital in South London, where doctors say that they are seeing a greater number of younger patients, many in their 30s and 40s, compared to the first wave. Hugh filmed the report with camera operator Harriet Bradshaw and producer Dominic Hurst.
It is loud and clear. COVID is serious.
Okay. The numbers are definitely increasing, and they're still increasing every day.
And I don't think I've ever known the whole system to be as stretched as it is right now under pressure.
This is A&E, but not as you know it. All staff are in full protective equipment. They know that most patients coming in have either tested positive or have symptoms.
How are you feeling now?
It's the breath that's the problem and the cough.
Can I have a little listen to you back? Is that all right?
Shubro is a consultant here.
Just sit forward for me a little and take a nice deep breath.
And he's assessing Hanifa, who's just arrived in an ambulance. She's 42. She tested positive a week before, and her condition steadily got worse.
I felt I was dying. I've been healthy, have any illness, nothing. But COVID just struck me down, just like that.
The sickest patients need to be in intensive care, and staff have to be on constant alert because patients can take a rapid turn for the worse.
It's a very, very sudden thing, and you just have to respond and reassess. And actually that patient looks like whatever the problem was we have sorted.
Staff have noticed that compared to the first wave, the age of COVID patients in intensive care is lower. For example, right here now, there are 2 people in their 30s with no underlying health conditions. The chances of someone under 40 needing intensive care for coronavirus are much smaller than for those who are older. The number of younger patients may be more noticeable because cases have risen across all age groups. Doctors are clear, no one is safe.
And I think, for someone who says, oh, it's a myth or, it won't affect me, then come and see the 30 and 40-year-olds in the intensive care with no guarantee that we're going to be able to get them out. And that's the bottom line, that's how serious it is.
You've seen some in that age group dying, have you?
Yes.
COVID is a multi-system disease, in effect, causing inflammation in all parts of the body, potentially. So we think that it affected his heart.
Alex, who's 32, suffered heart failure after going down with the virus.
My chest just felt like it was getting squeezed very, very hard. I was very surprised that it can do so much damage. I could never think of COVID being that dangerous. So I'm quite a healthy young man, quite active, play a lot of sports, go to the gym. So I was actually quite shocked. I'm lucky to be alive.
Almost half the beds at Croydon University Hospital are occupied by COVID patients. Since the start of the pandemic, they've treated nearly 2,000. But in their catchment area in the southeast of England, numbers are predicted to rise even further.
So I don't know how much more we can do before it gets to like, there's no more room, there's no more beds, there's no more nurses, there's no more space, there's no more anything. So yeah, I'm quite apprehensive.
Fatigue and stress for staff is more acute, and they say that takes its toll both professionally and personally.
When we came out of the first wave, I don't think any of us thought that we could do this again, and yet we are doing this again. It feels that the pressure is more sustained, and I do think that patient numbers are greater. And I think we're in for the long haul, actually.
Across the hospital, I have seen people struggle. They're tired, but I'm just proud, actually, to see how flexible people have been and adaptable to a rapidly changing situation.
Staff know whatever happens in the weeks ahead, they'll have to be there for patients, coping with whoever comes through the doors. Hanifa did not need to go into intensive care. She's been recovering in hospital. She and those who treated her have one clear message for the public.
COVID is a killer. COVID is real. Please out there, be careful. Be careful. Let's take the precautions seriously. Very, very serious.
Once again, a report on BBC News about the reality of life in some of these hospitals. First of all, your impression of the kind of pressure that staff are working under, and then really to help viewers with where we are tonight in terms of pressure in other parts of the NHS.
Well, Hugh, one impression I came away with from Croydon University Hospital was how adamant the staff are to get a message out there to the public that this is real. As one of them said, this is not fake news. These are people seriously ill, critical care capacity, very, very busy, the hospital half full of COVID patients. And these are 30 and 40-year-olds who are seriously ill coming in. Yes, with the right treatment, they will pull through, almost all of them, but it could leave them with long-term scars and difficulties with long COVID. And this is a reality. It's not just as characterised by some people who are a lot older with underlying conditions. And in fact, the 18 to 64-year-old group in England has risen faster for hospital admissions than other age groups just since the first wave, although there's no firm evidence that they necessarily get any sicker. So what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks? That pressure will only intensify. Critical care beds fill up and then more have to be created in hospitals. Elective surgery, routine surgery has to be cancelled, but then the options get very limited. One senior doctor in South Wales has told us that at one point today, all high-level intensive care beds in critical care were full, and it's a very difficult situation. In Southend Hospital, there are problems with oxygen levels. They're having to reduce them for some patients. Management say it's a critical situation. They're having to manage it because of high demand with COVID patients. Now, case numbers may just be levelling off in London and the South East, but there's real concern in government about a sharp rise in Merseyside, among other areas, a doubling per 100,000 population just in the last week. And of course, these new cases, some of them in due course will become more hospital admissions, and that's in a couple of weeks' time.
Hugh, many thanks again. Hugh Pym with the latest thoughts there for us. Well, as we've been hearing, leading scientists and advisors are concerned that lockdown restrictions might have to be tightened if people don't comply with the rules more fully. England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, has warned that the NHS is now facing the most dangerous situation that anyone can remember, and that everyone has a responsibility, as Hugh was saying there, to take pressure off the NHS. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has the latest.
Yes. Hi there.
The virus moves faster than the Prime Minister can get vaccines into arms. More and more of the most vulnerable, like Marion in Bristol, are receiving the jab.
Hi Marion, how are you doing?
But for Boris Johnson, this is not the time to relax.
This is a very perilous moment. Now is the moment for maximum vigilance, maximum observance of the rules, and of course, if we feel that things are not, are not being properly observed, then we may have to do more.
And with more patients in hospital with COVID than ever, it's not just doctors and nurses that have a job.
The next few weeks are going to be the worst weeks of this pandemic. We need to really double down. This is everybody's problem. Any single unnecessary contact you have with someone is a potential link in a chain of transmission that will lead to a vulnerable person.
That reminder because the streets are not as silent as the spring, where the shoppers in Beverley in Yorkshire, a residential road in Dorset, parked up with cars of walkers all heading for the beach. Data suggests we're out much more than back in March. Vesela has had the first jab of her vaccine, but is going out every day to get the paper.
This is my walk, because it drives me crazy to be at home all the time.
Lewis is opening his food stall because he still has to pay for his pitch.
In terms of the message of please stay at home, we encourage them to come out, so it's a bit contradiction.
But could changing the rules again be part of the answer?
We all want to see our loved ones. We all want to reclaim our lives. But we have a job to do first.
Do you think the government should tighten restrictions still further?
We may have to get tougher, but I think that the most important thing, if you like, is the message to people to stay at home.
There is anxiety in government, real fear that we're all just not sticking to the rules like we did back in spring. There have been conversations in Westminster about tightening the regulations still further, whether squeezing the advice on takeaways or changing how we shop. But there's no big political appetite or drive for another clampdown. One senior minister told me we've gone as far as we possibly can in terms of shutting things down. So the plea instead you'll hear again and again from scientists, government doctors and politicians. Stay at home, follow the rules to make a difference to this disease. But working out the do's and don'ts isn't always easy. 2 walkers who got in very public trouble last week for driving 5 miles for a walk in Derbyshire had their fines dropped today. But the Prime Minister, known for his love of cycling, has raised Labour eyebrows, going for a ride in the Olympic Park on the other side of London, 7 miles from Downing Street. Number 10 is adamant tonight he did nothing wrong, but whoever and wherever you are, it's not always straightforward to get a glimpse of life outside. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, head teachers have called for limits on the number of pupils who are allowed to attend school during lockdown because of attendance rates surging in some areas in England and staff reporting streets packed with parents during drop-off. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley has the story.
At Parkinson Lane Primary in Halifax, teachers are struggling with the numbers. During the first lockdown, 13 pupils attended. Today, there are more than 17 classes.
I mean, you say lockdown, but it doesn't feel like a lockdown, does it? I mean, teachers are having to split their time, not only teaching the children that have come into school, but also you've then got the vast majority that are trying to get online. We've had children go home with COVID and pass it on to grandparents who are living with them, and those grandparents sadly have passed on.
More than 600 pupils here are eligible for a school place, according to the government's criteria. A child needs one parent who is a key worker to be in school, and the government has expanded the offer of a school place to children who lack devices for remote learning and for those without a space to learn at home. Sajida is a teaching assistant and Iram is a school receptionist. Both are key workers, but have come to different decisions on bringing their children into school.
My child is actually at home because me and my husband have had to make the decision because of the infection rates and because the government told us schools are closed.
I've got the younger one here because I can't leave her on her own. My husband works, he's a key worker as well. So this time round, of course the infection rates are higher, but what they're feeling is that social interaction, the mental health side, is more important.
Just down the road at Ash Green Community Primary School, classrooms are full. The government says all children who can stay at home should, but the head teacher says parents are being given mixed messages.
To have advice like last week coming from the Secretary of State for Education, who said that children without laptops should report to school, is just extremely unhelpful, and there's going to have to be things that come in place, possibly looking at whether it's both parents being critical workers, possibly whether that list needs to be less ambiguous and it needs to be slimmer.
The government says it expects schools to work with families to ensure that all critical worker children are given a place. But some schools fear unless there is a limit on numbers, the lockdown will do little to stop the spread of the virus. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News in Halifax.
At the Old Bailey, a failed asylum seeker who murdered 3 men in a park in Reading last year has been given a whole life sentence for his crimes. The 3 friends were sitting in the park when they were stabbed by Khairi Sadallah in a brutal attack. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford reports on the case.
Police emergency.
A load of people have been stabbed in Thornbury Gardens. We need police and ambulances.
Yeah, I understand
Maybe
that.
like it's all the ambulances you can get.
On the phone to the 999 operator, Roger Smith had just witnessed what the judge has ruled was a terrorist attack. The speed of it caught on CCTV. The attacker, Khairi Sadallah, was hunted down just moments later by unarmed police. In the park, 3 friends lay dying. History teacher James Furlong, research scientist Dr David Wales and pharmaceutical manager Joseph Ritchie Bennett. All were gay, but it's not thought the attacker knew that. He then moved on to another group of men, first running at Andrew Cafe.
That image of him charging towards me, shouting Allahu Akbar, it's something that I have to sometimes consciously shut down in my head.
James Furlong's father welcomed the life sentence the killer received with no possibility of being released, remembering the night the family learned of his death.
To see my wife crumpled on the floor, it's a nightmare that will haunt me forever.
The family wants to know why Khairi Sadallah, a failed asylum seeker with a long, violent criminal record, was not still behind bars. Originally from Libya, Sadallah fought in the civil war as a teenager before fleeing to Britain. Once here, he served several prison sentences, coming out just 2 weeks before the attack.
Secretary of State needs to tell us why this guy wasn't put into some form of detention centre than before they could deport him. He was not safe to be released back on the street.
He was one of those people who gave me that impression.
Tony Bloomfield, who was in jail with him, told me he was known for his jihadi views.
He said a few times that he'd love to kill people. I'm a murderer, and people used to laugh at it as a joke because he was kind of a bit of a clown in prison.
I'm not in trouble, am I? No, you're not in trouble. We're just here to make sure you're all right.
The evening before the attack, Sadallah was visited by police. His brother had called them, concerned about his mental health.
How are you feeling yourself? I'm all right.
They left after he reassured them. Sadlah's brother Eamon told the BBC his warnings had not been taken seriously enough.
From what we saw, the police were there for 2 minutes. I'm not blaming anybody, but I do believe that a lot could have been done, and if it has, life would have been saved that day.
24 hours later, Sadallah left his flat for Reading town centre, finding a quiet spot to hide a carving knife in his shorts before heading out to kill as many people as he could. Daniel Sanford, BBC News.
In the US House of Representatives, Democratic leaders have put forward a resolution demanding that the Vice President, Mike Pence, and the rest of the cabinet deprive Donald Trump of his presidential powers. It could be voted on tomorrow. And if that fails, Democrats have warned that they'll move to impeach the president, and that would be for a second time. Mr. Trump has been accused of inciting his supporters to attack the US Congress last week. Let's talk to our North America editor, John Sopel, who joins us now. And John, from what you've gathered today, what's likely to happen here now?
I think on Wednesday the House is likely to vote on a single charge of incitement to insurrection. That will get passed. There'll then be a bit of a delay before it goes to the Senate, because I think Joe Biden will want to get his feet under the table before any trial pitches up there. There is a risk for Democrats that at the moment Donald Trump is seen as the villain. I'm sure his supporters will then try to posit it that he is the victim in all of this. That will play out over months. But what's really interesting that's unfolded today is that a number of the huge corporates have come out and said they are no longer going to give money to Republicans who voted against the certification of Joe Biden as the next president. And money is what lubricates American politics. One other thing, Hugh, the FBI have issued a bulletin saying they expect more armed protests in Washington and potentially in every state house across the country between now and inauguration. Last Wednesday doesn't seem to have been a one-off.
John, many thanks again. John Sopel with the latest thoughts there at the White House. Well, the decision by Twitter to close President Trump's account has led to renewed debate about how the social media platforms and the big tech companies are regulated. Chancellor Merkel of Germany, for example, said the decision was problematic, and other European leaders said that interfering with freedom of expression was a matter for official regulators, not for the big tech companies themselves. It's part of the ongoing debate about the online world and whether it's essentially a publisher or a platform. Our media editor, Amol Rajan, is here with his analysis. Amol.
Hugh, in America, the media, the system of public information and communication, is broken. Fixing it and making sure the same thing doesn't happen here depends on understanding where power lies today. Fearing regulation that will spook their investors, the data kings of California have for years resisted the idea that they are publishers. That era is over. A grand deplatforming of Donald Trump and many of his supporters is underway. Twitter's boss, Jack Dorsey, has deleted President Trump's account. Facebook has also suspended him. And now Amazon's web services and Apple with its App Store and also Google have said that they will no longer host Parler, a free speech network where extremism has flourished. These were human decisions, not algorithmic, and there are arguments against them. First, double standards. If Trump is banned, why isn't Iran's supreme leader, who has used Twitter to incite violence against Israel and promoted conspiracies about vaccines as recently as last week? And libertarians say that all ideas are better debated in the open and that such bans merely convert Trump into a free speech martyr. That was precisely the argument of these data kings until the past week. They are the editors of the internet, and they have more power than any politician or journalist in history. The question that matters is not have they made the right editorial call. The question that matters is it right that a handful of Californian billionaires should hold such sway over the 21st century public domain? Hugh.
Well, thanks very much again. Amol Rajan there, our media editor. Now, tomorrow, just a few days before he leaves office, President Trump is expected to allow the execution of the first female inmate in a federal prison in nearly 70 years. Lisa Montgomery has been in prison for 16 years for the murder of a pregnant woman, Bobby Jo Stinnett, in the state of Missouri. Montgomery's lawyers and campaigners against the death penalty argue that she's mentally ill and a victim of serious abuse who deserves mercy. Our correspondent Hilary Anderson travelled to the scene of the crime, and a warning: her report does include distressing details of the crime and the background of the woman who committed it.
It was midwinter and midday 2004 as Lisa Montgomery drove to the town of Skidmore through the desolation of western Missouri. In her jacket, a rope and a small knife. In this house lived 23-year-old Bobby Jo Stinnett. She was heavily pregnant. Lisa had come for her unborn child.
Nottoway County 911, what is your emergency? What's wrong? Okay, I'll get an ambulance started that way. Is she breathing?
Bobby Jo's mother found her body. Lisa had strangled Bobby Jo, cut into her womb, and extracted the baby.
Please, honey.
Witnesses still struggle to speak of it.
This case haunts those of us that worked it. This is a devil come back to earth disguised as Lisa Montgomery.
This was meticulously planned. Lisa had studied C-sections on the internet. She'd come prepared with a syringe and a clamp. The baby survived.
So this is it? This is where she's buried?
Bobby Joe's friend Karen, like many Americans, wants no mercy.
When Lisa was sentenced to death, how did you feel about that?
Yes.
You want to see her put to death?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. In fact, if I could pull the switch, I would do it.
But is Lisa Montgomery evil or just a broken woman? Lisa grew up in a child's hell. Her mother, Judy, beat and abused her.
She would duct tape her mouth shut if she was too loud or annoying or for any form of punishment. It would repeatedly happen.
Lisa's new lawyers say the abuse went even further. At 15 in a trailer, her stepfather, they say, began to sell her for sex to friends and repairmen. Lisa was gang raped.
So the plumbers would come in and have sex with her, and they would hit her if she did it wrong. Or if they needed electrical work, hey, I got a daughter here you can have sex with. It went on for years.
Lisa now has been diagnosed with mental disorders that make her delusional.
Yes, was she doing the act? She was, but she was not mentally there doing it. She was disassociating. She's gone. She's not there.
Lisa's mental disorders have never been accepted as cause for leniency. Many call them excuses. This is the prison, Terre Haute, Indiana, where, unless there's a last-minute ruling or pardon, Lisa will be killed by lethal injection.
If Lisa Montgomery is led to her death here tomorrow, she'll be the first woman in almost 70 years to be put to death by America's federal government. The end of Lisa's terrible and tortured life, one of President Trump's final stamps on America.
Donald Trump's already overseen the execution of more prisoners in a year than any president since the 1800s. President-elect Biden says he'll abolish the death penalty. But it may be too late for Lisa. Hilary Anderson, BBC News.
Now, when he moves into the Oval Office next week, Joe Biden, who is 78 and has been in public life for half a century, will become the first president who suffered from stammering. It's a condition that's believed to affect around 3% of the world's population. Our correspondent Felicity Baker, who has her own experience of dealing with the stammer, reports on the challenge and frustration that it often involves.
Hi, my name's Shelby and I'm 11 years old and I have a stammer.
Yeah. It was obvious from a young age Shelby was having problems speaking. He says school was difficult at first, but now his friends have got used to his stammer, although it can still be frustrating.
It's sometimes quite annoying when people try to guess what I'm trying to say, because people can interrupt you without not even knowing.
This is me when I was 25, trying to say my name. Could you tell me your name, please? Felicity Baker. I've had a stammer for as long as I can remember, along with an estimated 3% of the UK population. It's something I've worked hard to deal with throughout my life. 10 years later, I now work here as a producer in the BBC newsroom. I've never spoken about my stammer. Most of my colleagues will have no idea. Over the years, I've learnt various techniques to help me manage it, but I still don't like speaking on the phone, and there are plenty of words I will go out of my way to avoid saying, including my own name.
The national deficit is not rising, it is not falling.
Former Labour Cabinet Minister Ed Balls knows all too well what it's like to have a stammer in a high-profile public role.
Once I became a cabinet member in charge of all the schools in the country, it was very exposing. I stammered, and then behind me I heard a Labour voice say really loudly, he's supposed to be Secretary of State and he can't even get his words out. When I was told you should be public, I said, I can't be public. I can't admit a vulnerability like that. I'm a cabinet minister. It's not what people expect. And I felt quite worried about that it might be seen as weak, a failure.
Joe Biden will be the first president of the United States with a stammer, or stutter, as they call it in America.
Vice President Biden, your response, please.
Our response is, look, this isn't about, there's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey.
It's barely noticeable now, but he spent his whole life learning to control his speech.
I learned so much from having to deal with stuttering. It gave me insight into other people's pain, other people's suffering.
For children like Shelby, Joe Biden's openness about his stammer is inspiring.
It's very encouraging to see people with probably disabilities worse than me thrive with what they're doing today.
Felicity Baker, BBC News.
That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.